this June bullet journal plan with me video. This month we have a theme featuring some Japanese or Chinese gardens, lots of misty light green shades and red crowned cranes. So I hope you get to sit back with a drink or a snack maybe and have a peaceful journaling session with me. But without further introductions, let's get right into the theme, and we are starting from a cover spread as usual, but we are combining this with a monthly calendar. Before we do that, however, we're gonna start from the left page, which will have this layered garden painting with some interesting elements. So let's start walking through this step by step. The first thing we need is the bottom layer, which will be this pretty quick watercolor landscape of a Japanese style garden. I cut a piece of my Winsor & Newton watercolor paper and I started by drawing this circle a little bit above the middle of my paper, which will just indicate the placement of the round window in the end. I used a coffee cup for this step. Any round objects you have at home will work if you don't have a specific tool for drawing circles. And after we have this in place, I added just some very light pencil sketches for myself here, mainly for the pavilion thingy and for a few defined leaves that we're gonna add on top in the end. I know you can't really see much here, but it's okay. The pencil sketch is not very important for this painting, so now we can jump right into the coloring part. I started here with a flat brush, but a bigger round brush would work perfectly too. Just use something big enough that will allow you to work on the whole painting pretty quickly, because we're gonna start here with a wet on wet technique and pretty much go over the whole paper with this first light green color. My goal here was to create something pretty misty and hazy, so the shapes don't need to be super defined. And I wanted here to be some leaves and areas where a darker color blends into the overall light green. You could also add a hint of blue tone to the sky. And in general, I was switching the tones of green I was using in this painting quite a lot. So sometimes I was using a bit more olive green tone, and then in the other areas I mixed some turquoise or darker grayish blue into the mixture. You can also see here that I pretty much went directly over the area where the small building will be, because that will be the darkest part of this whole painting, so it doesn't matter if we add lighter colors to that area. I was also very carefully trying to tap some darker color on top of the background layer so that it would still blend into the paper a little bit. If you add more color on top of an area that's already drying, it might create some blooming effect. My advice here would be to have very little water left in your brush and mainly going in with the color alone, because adding water on top of water is the surest way to get those blooms, so working with a drier brush is your best option. Then after letting this layer completely dry, I started to add a second layer of these leaves, bushes and random tabs. I just wanted to create a little bit more dimension and texture to the landscape, even though what we have here is still very light and barely visible. I sometimes get questions about which I think is more versatile, watercolors or gouache paints, and I always have a very hard time answering that because you can use them for very different things. And I think a painting style like this is a very good example of something you can only create with watercolors. Creating a similar landscape with gouache is absolutely possible, but the style of the painting would probably be quite different, since you'd need to work with opaque layers and probably have more defined elements instead of fading your leaves to nothingness as we're trying to do here. But yeah, that was just a quick side note for anyone who might be wondering that. And now I wanted to add a few of these darker, long, wispy leaves because I thought we needed some darker details here. And then the last step of this painting process was to paint the pavilion itself. I went with this dark gray shade and used a smaller detailing brush for all these final shapes. And even though we want this to be quite dark, we still want to start with light enough colors that we're still able to add some deeper shadows into the shapes. But now, after the whole painting process was done, I got to the point that gave me the most trouble with this picture. So I had this idea to use vellum paper to create this round window and maybe some paper door or wall type of effect. However, I did find it a little bit tricky to draw these shapes on the vellum paper. First I tried it with watercolors, but it was very difficult to get them even, and this thin paper started to wrinkle pretty easily. So next I tried the same thing with a gray brush pen, which gave me something closer to the look I was going for. However, I also knew that I wanted to add the crane on top of all of this, so I started to think if adding the window layer would cover the background painting too much, and I was being so indecisive here that I actually decided to finish the calendar side first in case it might help me to make these decisions. I swear, sometimes I wish I could ask your guys' opinion while I film these videos, but I guess at least you'll see some different variations here and kind of decide what you like the best for yourself. Anyway, there wasn't anything super interesting on this calendar side. We're just writing a big cursive title. It's officially the time of the year when all the monthly titles are really short. And then I used this green paper for the calendar itself, which I printed myself on a white sticker paper. If you want to use this exact color, I do have it listed on my shop in the free section. I'll link it down to the description. There's lots of other free stuff to download. Anyway, these paper calendars are just such a simple way to add a bit of color to the page while keeping everything very quick and simple. And I personally also like to use this type of calendar the most, where the weekdays are next to each other without a gap. But now that the calendar side was done and the time for procrastination was over, I finally created the last elements for the cover. I started with the red crown crane, which is also apparently called the Japanese crane. It's such a symbolic piece of Japanese art, and I thought that the overall style this month suited it very well. So I just drew it on this regular copy paper because we don't need to add much color to it, and I felt like it was the easiest option. So I just drew a very quick pencil sketch for it, so just outlining the main shape of the bird, and after that we are adding those few colored accents with watercolors. I feel like this small red accent was very needed in this theme, since everything else will be in these various tones of light green. The small red pop of color really brought this whole spread together somehow. Then I just cut out the bird, and after thinking about it for a while, I finally decided to include the window layer in this spread. I felt like the bird stood out a little bit better against it, and I think it also gave this spread a little bit more unique look. And you know, since I took the time to draw it, why not use it? Then the very last thing I still wanted to add here were these few white flowers that I wanted to add to the top corner. I felt like there needed to be something white to balance out the crane. But now that the final hanging branch is on the page, we're finally done with the whole cover and calendar spread. I ended up actually really liking this one, and if you like it too, there will be a digital version of this theme over on my shop and also on my Patreon in the $5 tier. Links to all of that are in the description. But anyway, now it's time to move on, and next we're gonna set up an overall monthly planning spread. I wanted to keep the decorations on this one a little bit more simple, so I had this idea to try out these dot cloud decorations. I think I must have seen something like this in the Japanese art pictures I was scrolling through for this theme, and basically all you need is one pen and a bunch of dots. I did draw the outlines of these clouds with a pencil, so it was a little bit easier to follow those lines, and that's how we can keep the shapes very even. And basically the way this works is that you start the outlines of the clouds with the dots very close to each other, and then with every row you start to separate them little by little, and it will eventually create these simple shapes. I was happy I chose to go with this very light color. I think this might have looked a little bit too busy with something darker, but eventually this type of light shade will kind of blend to the background, especially when we add some black titles and write on the spread. So I think it will work out just fine. The end result wasn't maybe exactly what I was expecting, but nevertheless, I think this type of decoration is very easy to achieve and also modify for different shapes. So if you don't have much time or prefer simple, pressure-free decorations, I think you might like to try this out. I left this empty space in the bottom corner where we're gonna draw another crane. But before doing that, let's finish up the rest of the spread first. Since I pretty much always write a planning title to these pages, I wanted to switch it up a little bit by writing this big "This Month" title instead. And I also tried out this font, which was a little bit different from my regular style. I'll leave the font name to the screen that I was kind of following for this, but I might have switched some letters a little bit, I'm not completely sure. Anyway, on this first page, I just wanted to list a few important things or projects I have going on in June. And also, I really think it's helpful to write out the timeline for all the projects. June will be a pretty busy month for me with the new summer collection launch over on my shop and also the new healthier setup video that's coming. I'll also gonna take a small summer holiday this year for the first time in like so many years. I'll probably do that in the beginning of July, so I'll need to get everything done before that. But then on the second page, we're gonna start with this double lined box with these overlapping corner decorations that I think really suited the style of this theme. And this box is just gonna be for me to write out my personal expectations for the month ahead. Basically, it's just gonna force me to take a small moment to really consider what's my focus for the next month. Stuff like what's important and what's not so important that I should not waste my time on it when I have other necessary things and not much time to lose. But after this, before we move on, we'll finish this spread with the bird decoration here at the bottom. Again, these were pretty straightforward to draw and color because there are only a few colors you need. I did mess up the peak because I was using too big of a brush for it, so I had to cover some of that smudginess with a white pen later. But otherwise, after we have the red and black areas in place, I added some light brown and gray tones to the body just to get some shadowing to it. It can sometimes be tricky to color objects that are supposed to look white because you still need some color to bring out the dimensions. So usually when that's the case, I try to use some very light, unseeming colors like neutral gray or brown tones. And then since there was a little bit empty space here, I wanted to finish this spread with this one quote that says, "Find your inner calm in the chaos." Because again, I know June will be a hectic month for me, and I know I'll need to say this quote later. But that's it for this simple monthly planning spread. And now let's move on to the weekly setup. I knew I wanted this weekly layout to have a little bit bigger decoration piece again, so I went with my favorite Dutch door weekly layout, which means that we are cutting these few pages in the middle to create this booklet almost, and then we have the full spread underneath to decorate however we want, and we can enjoy the art piece for the full course of the month. I wanted to tie this cut shape to the double-lined boxes this month, and I also left a little bit more room towards the bottom of the spread because that's where we'll draw some of the decorations later. However, let's get these Simply Weekly setups out of the way first. So I decided to use the outer pages for the first and last weeks of June, where we don't have a full week. And then the 3 full weeks in June will go on their own spreads in the middle. Again, I thought we could easily bring some color to this spread by using the light cream paper, and I made these daily boxes where you can make your daily to-do list or mark any appointments or deadlines you'll need to remember. If you've seen my flip through videos of these themes I've used, you'll see that I only tend to list like 2 to 3 things per day. I know from experience that if there are more than like 4 things on my to-do list, I'm not gonna get all of them done. It's just not realistic for me. Now, of course, there are many small things you do over the course of the day, like chores around the house and so on. I tend to use my bullet journal to track mainly things related to my work, and keeping that to-do list short has helped me so much in becoming more mindful of how long things take to build in reality. I know I talk a lot about this in my videos, but if you are a person who has a goal or a vision of what do you want to do in life, or you want to build something for yourself, it's really hard to accept the fact that things are gonna take a lot longer than you imagined. And at least for me, it helps to have someone else saying that it's completely normal, that it happens to them too. We all have bad days, we all have bad weeks, but what matters in the end is the bigger picture and winning the year, not that one day. So yeah, hopefully that makes some of you feel better about not necessarily being where you want to be just yet. I know I'm still on my journey and I'm still learning, but that's why we use a bullet journal and try to somehow keep all of this stuff together. Anyway, rambling over, so otherwise a simple happy tracker and some space for notes is exactly what I've needed on my weekly pages recently, and then all we have left is to draw the background decorations. I wanted this spread to have another Japanese or Chinese inspired scenery. I honestly don't know where the line goes between Japanese and Chinese art. At least for me, they kind of fit under the same umbrella. But nevertheless, I drew this fence decoration to the bottom, and then the simple temple building surrounded by some hanging leaves again. And we're gonna finish this spread with one more flying crane decoration. I found it the easiest again to color this spread with watercolors, because that's how you get to use exactly the colors you want, but this could easily be achieved with brush pens too, or with gouache paints or colored pencils even. I kept the shapes and coloring very minimal here on purpose because I didn't want this to become too complex and take too long time. And eventually I really liked how all of this framed the weekly section, especially the fence thing at the bottom. I also added these swirly clouds a bit later, and I just love how they look. I used this thin 005 size micron to draw them, and it gave them this very thin, wispy appearance. The hanging leaves are a great opportunity again to play with different tones of green, and it allows you to add some variation to this otherwise pretty monotone color scheme. So yeah, other than that, I have nothing much to say here, and now I just need to fill the rest of the weeklies out of the camera. But it means that we are now ready to flip ourselves to the last spread of this month, which will be a monthly reflection spread. I was so excited about the swirly decorations in the previous spread that I wanted to use them again here, but this time I wanted to try them out with the dot style we used on the planning spread. So I took out the same greenish pen and started to go along these swirl outlines. However, I don't think this method was the right choice, to be honest. It was quite impossible, at least for me, since I was running out of patience here to keep these shapes straight. So everything looked a little bit crooked here, not necessarily the look I was going for, but oh well, it's the last spread. I mean, we can't expect much here. So I just went with it and continued the rest of the spread how I had planned. So after the reflection title, I started with this short section of my favorite things in June. I love to list a few of these things at the end of the month. It's so fun to look back and be reminded of a song or a hobby you had that perfectly describes a certain time of your life and brings back all the memories. Then I always like to have a what's on my mind section, which basically is just a few lines of unfiltered brain dump that you can do at the end of the month. So whatever you need to process, whatever you have thought or felt recently, this is the place to get it out on paper and move on with a little bit more clarity. Then we are starting the last page of this theme by following with these similar decorations we've been doing this far, so some hanging leaves, and then even though I didn't like them that much, I felt like I had to do the same swirl clouds here to keep everything balanced and add that touch of light green also to this other page. In terms of the content, I decided to go with this scale thing I've used in my previous themes. So the middle line would be the 0 point, and then you can review the past month on these 5 different categories and see where your head is at. And then as the last section, I think it's always good to list a few of the victories of the month that you are proud of, and also a few things where you feel like you could have done better and you'll need to improve moving forward. But there we have it, guys. I really hope you'll enjoy this light and calming monthly theme and get some new decoration or journaling ideas from it. I'll be back with a new journal and a new healthier setup very soon, and stay tuned for the new shop summer collection too. We'll do a theme related to it probably in July, and I hope you'll love it. And as always, if this was your first time around here and you'd like to stay tuned for more, definitely consider subscribing. It would be highly appreciated. And yeah, I guess that's it for this time. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!